Therefore, at this time, we will now give the floor to the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, ICAN.
Madam President and delegates, I am honored to be given this opportunity as a survivor from Hiroshima to speak at this historic occasion. Already 72 years have passed since my beloved hometown was utterly destroyed by one atomic bomb. Those of us who survived became convinced that no human beings should ever have to experience the inhumanity and unspeakable suffering of nuclear weapons. And we hibakusha have worked tirelessly for decades for the total elimination of those devices of mass murder, cross-generational radioactive violence. We made a vow to our loved ones that their death will not be in vain. By now, about 250,000 people have perished in Hiroshima alone. Many people whose dream was nuclear weapon abolition in their lifetime. Whenever I remember Hiroshima, the first image that comes to my mind is my 4-year-old nephew, who was transformed into an unrecognizable, blackened, swollen, melted chunk of flesh, who kept begging for water in a faint voice until his death released him from agony. This little boy's image has come to represent in my mind all the innocent children of the world, threatened as they are at this very moment by nuclear weapons. Your task this week, and again over 3 weeks in June and July, is to establish a clear new international standard to declare in no uncertain terms that nuclear weapons are illegitimate, immoral, and illegal. I am not naive. I know that some nations will dismiss this instrument. They will cling to their misguided belief that they are somehow entitled to possess these life-destroying weapons which threaten us all. I especially condemn the Japanese government's inability to fully commit to these negotiations. Indeed, yesterday morning, the Japanese government official speech deepened hibakusha's feeling of being continuously betrayed and abandoned by their own country. They claim to be playing a vital role in nuclear disarmament by bringing foreign dignitaries to Hiroshima with the hope that they will learn the reality of nuclear catastrophe. But these are empty, evasive actions as they continue to take shelter under the United States nuclear umbrella. Indeed, they should take, instead, they should take independent position which responds to the will of Japanese people. For those of you delegates who are genuinely serious about disarmament, I want you to feel the presence of not only the future generations who will benefit from your negotiations to ban nuclear weapons, but to feel also the spirit of the dead witnesses from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The memories of and images of those perished have always supported and guided me. I think this is how many survivors have kept on living, to make sure that the death of their loved ones were not in vain. As you proceed through this week, I hope you also feel their presence and support. Please do your job well and know that we Hibakusha survivors have no doubt that this treaty can and will change the world. Thank you.
Le agradezco a la señora.
Thank you, Madam, for sharing this extremely important message with us. And you heard the unanimous applause in this room. We are all delegations present here are fully committed to this cause, to achieving this goal, and that is to ensure that nuclear weapons will never again be used under any circumstance. Thank you very much, Madam.
Le doy la palabra
I give the floor now
a Sue Coleman.
to Sue Coleman Hasseldine,
Sobreviviente
a survivor of one of the nuclear tests of Australia.
Thank you, Madam President. My name is Sue Coleman Hasseldine. I was born in 1951 on Caniba Mission. I was a small child when the British and Australian governments tested nuclear weapons in the South Australian desert near my birthplace. For over a decade, full nuclear explosions and hundreds of experiments dispersed plutonium and other weapons materials, contaminating almost all of Australia. Aboriginal people were still living close to the test sites and were told nothing about radiation. Some communities were so contaminated that most people developed acute radiation sickness. High rates of cancer were eventually documented in the 16,000 test workers, but no studies were done on Aboriginal people and others living in areas of fallout, many of whom were even more highly exposed. High rates of cancer and chronic illness haunt my family and our wider community. My small town of Ceduna is being called the cancer capital of Australia. I worry about animals and plants which are also harmed by radiation. They can't speak for themselves and are ignored and left to die. Today, the Australian and South Australian governments are again proposing nuclear waste dumps for South Australia, as if having been poisoned once, it's somehow okay for us and our lands to be radioactively sacrificed again. The language and rationale being used today is very similar to that of the 1950s. Desolate, unused lands, being used in the national interest. We won't accept this, not for us, not for the broader community. We know from bitter experience that nuclear materials and weapons can never be safe. Aboriginal people have the oldest living culture on the planet and have cared for these lands continuously. Despite attempts to annihilate, assimilate and suppress us, we remain committed to looking after our people, cultural knowledge, lands and waters. Though we live in remote Australia, we now know that everywhere they have been used worldwide, nuclear weapons have devastated people and their lands. Together we need to connect the past, present and future and work towards a treaty to ban all nuclear weapons so there will be no new victims under a mushroom cloud. A nuclear ban treaty is also an opportunity to assist countries to make amends to victims of nuclear weapons. The treaty should acknowledge the permanent damage done to people, land and culture across generations, and particularly for Indigenous people worldwide. It should require countries to address the needs of impacted people. I'm speaking to you today in the hope that by working together, life on Earth can continue into a safe, nuclear-free future. A nuclear weapons ban treaty is a crucial step on the path to that future becoming a reality, as it must. I know that the future is not ours. It will forever belong to the next generation. Thank you for listening to me.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ms. Coleman Hasseldine, for sharing your eyewitness account with us. I now give the floor to
Yayoi Tsushida Gensukyo.
Thank you, Madam President. It is a great honor for me to speak on behalf of a civil society movement in Japan, the only A-bombed country in the world. The Japanese people, including the Hibakusha, A-bomb survivors, are welcoming this conference. Since 1955, we convene every year the World Conference Against A and H bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and have called for a total ban and the elimination of nuclear weapons. We heartily suggest that this conference will achieve a treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons, and thus taking a major step to the total elimination of nuclear weapons. In particular, I would like to emphasize the following points. First, in view of the founding objective of the United Nations to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, the prohibition of nuclear weapons is the prime task for the UN to fulfill. The appeal of the Hibakusha that humans cannot coexist with nuclear weapons should find its expression in the treaty. Second, the states possessing nuclear weapons should participate in the treaty. We are in the position that even if they do not do so at the initial stage, a treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons should be agreed upon in this conference and be signed, ratified, and put into effect without delay. The Hibakusha are saying that they cannot wait any longer. It is time to take a bold step to achieve the treaty. Third, we hope that the treaty should have a clear formulation that all states, regardless of nuclear or non-nuclear, have an obligation to achieve the prohibition and the elimination of nuclear weapons and to maintain a world without nuclear weapons. In this negotiation conference, our government should carry out its responsibility as the able country. The treaty will outlaw nuclear weapons for the first time in history. We believe that it will be a decisive step towards a world without nuclear weapons. We express our determination that we will do our utmost together with you to advance the process from banning nuclear weapons to their complete elimination. Thank you for your attention.
Yes, go ahead. We have 5.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tsuchida, on behalf of the Japan Council Against A and H Bombs. I now give the floor to Ms. Jamin Nario Galas from Faith Communities.
Destroyed by one atomic bomb. Those of us who survived became convinced that no human beings should ever have to experience the inhumanity and unspeakable suffering of nuclear weapons. And we Hibakusha have worked tirelessly for decades for the total elimination of those devices of mass murder, cross-generational radioactive violence. We made a vow to our loved ones that their death will not be in vain. By now, about 250,000 people have perished in Hiroshima alone.
Therefore, at this time, we will now give the floor to the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, ICAN.
Madam President and delegates, I am honored to be given this opportunity as a survivor from Hiroshima to speak at this historic occasion. Already 72 years have passed since my beloved hometown was utterly